Well, howdy, folks. This is Bill Meeks, and welcome to the inaugural live episode of Where I'm From. I have a great guest today. I just wanted to hop in here real quick and explain exactly what you're watching. This is a more produced podcast slash video format, but I thought it would be cool to go ahead and live stream the recording of it. One, because my sponsor, Stream Studio, is awesome for live streaming, and I thought I should feature that. And plus, it gives us a chance to not have to be super perfect. We can have flubs and breaks, and we can also take questions from you, the audience, throughout the show. Now, the finished video podcast with added clips and context will be released in a couple weeks on the feeds and on my YouTube channel and everywhere else. As we go on, make sure if you're out there, I don't know if anyone's watching or not, but make sure you ask our guest questions in the chat. Time allowing, I'll get to as many as I can towards the end. So we're going to get started here in just a minute. But first, why don't you learn a little bit about Paul Zaloom? Welcome to Where I'm From, the podcast that proves no matter how far you go, you'll always keep a little piece of home with you. I'm Bill Meeks. This week, actor and puppeteer Paul Zaloom joins us to talk about where he's from, the village of Garden City in Nassau County on Long Island, New York. He's Beakman, and we've just broken into Paul Zaloom's world. You might know Paul Zaloom better as Beakman, the other scientific sketch comedian who hosted a 90s Saturday morning educational show called Beakman's World.
Stay in there?
Get ready for Amazement City. Ray? Ha-ha! Bada bing, bada bang, bada ball.
Paul's an accomplished performer with a background in everything from theater to puppetry to sketch comedy. But years before he traded quips with Lester the Rat, he kicked around the village of Garden City. Garden City, New York, was founded in 1869 by merchant millionaire Alexander Turney Stewart to create a place that, quote, embodied his ideals, wisdom, and wealth, which is probably why Paul describes it as 100% white and square and boring as hell. Let's talk to Paul about his community, the surrounding cities where he went to school and got more hip, and maybe one or two science questions, just for fun. And folks, I am pleased to welcome today to Where I'm From, Beakman himself, Mr. Paul Zaloom. How you doing, Paul?
All right. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
I am so excited to have you. I was telling you before we went live that I loved Beakman's World as a kid. It was like Pee-wee Herman meets Mr. Wizard almost, just like this really like goofy sort of like broad sketch comedy approach to science, which I grew up in a homeschooling household that pulled us out of school because they didn't like science that much. So it was really like my one way in to science. So
That's
thank you
cool.
for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's great. I love hearing the stories.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into the questions here about Garden City. To start with, was Garden City a supportive environment for young artists like you?
I really didn't have that much to do with the town because I went to school, a private school that was like a 25-minute drive. So I didn't have a lot of friends in the neighborhood. They tend to be on the North Shore up by where the school was. But there was a lot of places to ride your bike and, run around, golf courses and stuff like that. So yeah, it was suburbs.
I saw in my research that that they are very proud of the number of golf courses they have. It was like right there. It was like one of the few facts I could find on the main Wikipedia page for it.
Yeah, that's interesting, huh?
So
And
this.
it
Oh, go
was
ahead.
easy to sneak in. So
Mhm.
I remember
So
one time when I was a kid, I heard this voice, like an amplified voice, and I got on my
mhm.
bike and I followed it. And it was at Adelphi College then, it's university now. It was Robert Kennedy giving a speech. And I just followed the sound on my bike, and there he was giving a speech. It was cool. It's like a mile away.
Very, very distinctive voice to follow too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe not within his own family. Um, what about what was the town you went to school in again? Was there a lot of art and stuff there, or like was it something that you kind of approached while you were still home?
Uh, yeah, it was in Roslyn, at the end of a long road that was also on a golf course, and which is uh, got turned into a housing development subsequently.
Mhm,
And it was in an old the school's in like an old manor home, like an English estate.
mhm.
So it was pretty fancy and had fancy floors, and yeah, it's all Gothic revival, and it was pretty corny.
Bougie, I guess, as the kids say these days.
Yeah.
In the message you sent me, you said there was sort of like a marked difference between your actual neighborhood that you grew up in and the neighborhood you went to school in. Like, so it was more of like a fancier neighborhood that you would like sort of, I don't know, travel to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the interesting neighborhood was the one next door to Garden City, which is Hempstead,
Mhm,
which was predominantly black town, and Garden City was 100% white. So
mhm,
the cool record store was in Hempstead.
mhm.
Um, I think I wrote you about the guy that his name was Swede. He was an
Uh-huh.
immigrant from Sweden, and he had all the jazz albums. And what particularly interested me and my brother, he had all the blues albums, like everything, and folk albums.
Mhm,
But like the whole chess catalog, and Victoria Spivey and all that blues stuff. She had her
mhm.
own record label, and I know he carried her records. Uh, I mean, not to get down in the weeds, but she used to go around and distribute the records herself in her limousine. She was
Oh, really?
yeah, she was in Chicago, and she would have people like Muddy Waters playing her records, but they had deals with Chess Records, so um, she couldn't use her real. They couldn't use their real names on her albums because they had exclusive contracts. So
Yeah.
he'd be like Cloudy Stream instead of Muddy Waters. But anyway, those kind of records, obscure blues records and folk records, and Hempstead was the cool go-to place when I was a kid.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that the pseudonym inspiration there might have carried over a little bit into you, because like most people I think know you as Beakman. Like you have a much storied career. I did a lot of research on YouTube and Wikipedia and everything else, but they know you a lot as Beakman. What would you say? Do you think there were any local influences where you're from that kind of informed the Beakman character?
Well, the local TV, Soupy Sales, that was
Mhm.
a local show. I think it got syndicated later on, but it was a kid show, the Soupy Sales show. And that was on in the 50s and 60s. And that was a pretty big influence on Beekman. I thought, it was kind of the way to go, is to follow the Soupy model. And
Mhm.
I guess they may have shot in Chicago at some point, but then they were in New York, and he had started somewhere in the Midwest. So I know he was shooting out of New York at some point in his career, but we were very influenced by the way he treated the frame of the TV like it was a stage, like that it had
Yeah.
edges. It's like an
Mhm.
old vaudeville way of looking at it. So
Proscenium. Yeah.
yeah, and so that meant that there were wings, and he
Mhm.
would look into them, and he played to the crew, so his eye line was to the crew. I mean, that had never been done in television before or since,
Yeah.
um, except I think the Uncle Floyd show did that, which was influenced by Soupy. It was a fake. Uncle Floyd was a New York local, and I think syndicated TV show that was kind of a spoof on a Soupy style kid show, and he
Mhm.
played to the crew. So the eye line would be where your eye line would never be, talking to people off mic, and they're laughing, and there's like a dozen of them. That's it.
Mhm.
So, and then the White Fang and Bluetooth were hands that came in, the arms that came in fursuits, and you never
Yeah.
saw. And Soupy would look up at them. You never saw them. All you saw was the arm. And I think it's really
Mhm.
great for kids that it's not all spelled out. You had to use your imagination. Like, what is that thing? And they would come and go, and then Soupy would translate whatever he said, and the guy would bring the arm would bring in a pie or whatever. So we had that thing of a hand coming in from the side. It was a character called Ray, and it was a way to have things brought onto the set. Like if we needed a cup and some glue or whatever, Ray could bring that in.
Mhm.
And he was an IATSE guy. He was a prop guy, but he also had a union card because he was a comedian and, an actors union, the SAG, I guess the SAG card. And so every time the director, Jay Dubin, would say, okay, have Ray bring it in, the crew would all go cha-ching. He was getting like the daily rate, the daily IATSE, hand in rate, whatever.
Yeah. Those royalties for a hand are very high, especially back in the 50s. So, you kind of, you talking about Soupy sales kind of made me think a lot about theater and stuff like that. So I was wondering, when you were growing up there and everything, was there a lot of local theater? Did you get involved in theater stuff locally, or was that more when you went to college and everything?
Yeah, only in school.
Mhm.
I was in the school plays. And of course, they were, competitions. Makes zero sense. But there were two teams in the school, the blue and the red. I, of course, was the blue. My whole family we were all blues. And they would have one play a year, and part of the tally that the two teams were trying to reach, because it was all the sports, all the points, we competed. And at the end of the year, so one of the ways to earn points was having the better play. And that was more my speed than the athletic stuff.
Mhm. Do you remember what plays you did? Did you do like classics like Our Town or anything like that?
I don't remember. I mean, I
Oh, you
remember
don't.
in public school, because I went to public school in kindergarten, first grade.
Mhm.
We did a show where we were all rabbits,
Mm.
and each one of us, our moms would make the costumes. It was a pretty, it had a pretty wild aesthetic all over the place. And
I'll say what I was going to say. I think we share that though, because my first stage production, I was Thumper in Bambi, so we both got our starts playing rabbits.
right, right. Yeah, and one family rabbits had spots and one family didn't. I don't know what that was about, but I played the lead role of the Daddy Bunny, and I do have pictures of me in my costume, looking like super cute. Yeah. So, and then no, I don't remember the plays. I remember in high school what plays I was in.
Mhm.
Arsenic and Old Lace. I played a cop.
Classic.
Yeah, just played a minor role, but kind of stole the scene. Me and the guy with me, there were two of us, and I said, "Oh, let's chew gum. We'll make a big deal out of blowing bubbles and shit like that." And so that's what we did, and we kind of stole the scene, but it was okay, I guess. And
That's always so fun when you can find someone, a fellow actor on stage to like, because you're performing the same play over and over and over again. It's nice to be able to change it up. Like I remember when I was in Dial In for Murder, I was the detective, and I would write the most obscene things I possibly could on my notebook that I showed to another character during the show, and it would be like a challenge to see if I could get him to break.
right, right, yeah, yeah. I never did that. But in high school, I was in the Zoo Story, and the playwright was an alumnus of the school, so he came to the production. I was like 15 or 16. And, this is a 6-page speech. I played Jerry in the Zoo Story, and Edward Albee's in the audience. And So I did vamp a little bit, and he said he didn't appreciate the variations on the text, which I understand. You know, he wrote the thing; would have been good if I had memorized my lines. But it was a tough school. It was a lot of homework and all kinds of crap. And uh, I've never been much good at learning lines. But anyway, and then we also did the American Dream. I played Mommy. That's another Albee play. I played Mommy, and I had my hair and my beard in curlers. I had a beard, I guess, when I was 18 or whatever. But we did a super campy version of the American Dream, the Albee play. That
Yeah,
one you can come to.
And that kind of, I guess, probably kickstarted, because Beakman's World, one of the things that I always remember about it is all the costumes and the wigs, and your Roy G. Biv character always sticks out in my mind is like the hippie guy. So I guess you got to start sort of putting on different characters physically pretty early on.
Yeah. It was, they got the idea from the first show. I played Galileo, not the first, maybe it was the first show or the second show or something. I had to have an Italian accent. And Betsy Potter, the costume designer, tricked me all out in this sort of Renaissance-y, corny, Italian outfit. And I played Galileo with like a cartoony Italian accent. And I remember the writers saying, "Can you do other accents?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I can pretty much do, just tell me what you want and I'll do the best I can." Which, ranged from being pretty okay to like really not okay. But I got to play a lot of characters, and that was really fun.
Yeah, you can definitely tell you like kind of cycling through them. Again, I bring up the Roy G. Biv character just because that sticks out of my mind. But I feel like you probably played 5 or 10 different characters in every episode of Beakman's World.
Yeah, definitely not that many. I mean, there was Art, the chef, the cook, and he was just more New York than Beakman was. Beakman already had some little bit of New York going on, but Art was like totally, from the neighborhood, and the director Jay Newman, he's a New Yorker and he grew up in Brooklyn. He has a total Dems and Does Brooklyn accent. Yeah, so and then the dead guys from Science, and then there was also Meekman, but that was a one shot. There was Professor Boring. Was that what it was called? Professor Boring. And I wore like sort of Jerry Lewis goofy teeth, and it was they were made like old film reels.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he mainly did definitions, but he had like super buck teeth.
Now, something I didn't really realize until I started doing the research and stuff is not only, are you sort of, a character actor, a character comedian, but you're also, you do a lot of puppetry and stuff. What kind of led you to pursue puppetry?
Well, I really haven't worked as an actor, except like a couple of times in 50 years. I got involved with the Bread and Puppet Theater because I went to a hippie college in Vermont, and they were in residence there. And I took a couple of workshops, and they said, "Hey, you want to join, be in the company?" And I said, "Sure." And so that's what I did, and I still work there. And that was 51 years ago.
So let's go ahead and get back to your hometown a little bit here. You mentioned that, you went to a school in a different area than you lived. And you might have explained this a little bit before, but maybe get into detail. Like, why did you have the commute? And how did it affect you growing up miles away from most of your friends over on the ritzy side of town?
My folks didn't have much confidence in the public school system in Garden City. I mean, I'm sure it was pretty good, the schools, but what do I know? And my dad was Catholic. My mom was Anglican. So she was, not particularly enamored with Catholicism. She was an English citizen. My mom was a war bride My dad was a GI. My mom was an RAF. But anyway, they wanted me to go to private school, all of us, and there were no private schools in Garden City at that time. I mean, there was one, but I think that was a boarding school, like a high school,
Yeah.
secondary school. So we,
Mhm.
this was the choice. It was called Buckley Country Day School. Was that corny, waspy, very much a ruling class kind of wasp, upper shelf. There were
Mhm.
some people there who were their parents were middle class or upper middle class,
Yeah.
but then there were some who they lived in neighborhoods that didn't have sidewalks. You know,
Mhm. I know you're a pretty liberal guy and everything. Do you have any sort of like retroactive, I don't know, guilt or something for going to kind of like a posh school with, various issues swirling around you?
I don't I don't know if I have guilt.
Hmm.
It's just interesting. It was an interesting experience. I went to boarding school, Choate School, which is another very good school, sort of fancy and you know high on the list of good secondary private schools in the country. But
Hmm.
I didn't really care for it much, or their philosophy, which is sort of Episcopalian. And I went to Quaker summer camp, and I found the Quakers to be much more interesting and loving of children, um, and more progressive, and just had a much better relationship to the idea of raising kids and teaching kids.
Hmm.
So I ended up being an exchange student for 3 months at Putney School, which was like the first sort of progressive boarding school in the United States, founded, I think, in the 40s. And then that led me to go to Goddard College, which was a hippie college in Vermont.
Hmm. So this is the second time the word hippie has come up. I feel moved to ask you, like, do you consider yourself a hippie? I mean, I know you're probably somewhere right in the right range as far as age is concerned, but do you still kind of consider yourself a hippie and the hippie aesthetic and all that?
Uh, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't really think about it a lot. I'm not ashamed of it. I wouldn't deny it. Um, there's a lot of aspects to me and to my life, the way I do things, the way I live, that are hippie for sure.
Mhm.
But I don't know. Yeah, sure. I had really long hair when I was a kid, but
Mhm.
it was super curly. So instead of
Yeah.
it being like, it would just like turn into a pom pom. Like if I tied it back, it was just this big frizz ball.
Mhm.
I definitely had a white guy afro going on, because it was just, instead of growing down, it grow just bang like that. I
Just
don't really
poof
have that
out.
problem now, but
Yeah, I always tell people when I was a kid, anytime I went to get my hair cut, the barber would always go, "Man, you have such thick hair." And then when I was about 24, 25, they stopped saying that, and it kind of
uh,
broke my heart.
right, right,
Happens to the best of us. Happens to the best of us. Okay,
yeah.
so what what do you remember? It might not even be around anymore, but what are some sort of can't miss attractions that you'd recommend to people visiting Garden City, even like historical sites, like I said, things that aren't there anymore?
Oh my God. That's a hard question, because the one thing that I found interesting there when I was a kid was the Garden City Hotel. And
Mhm.
this is a huge, really big old hotel that was kind of right in the middle of the town. And I used to like to bike ride up there and then just sort of sneak in and wander around. I think there was a barber shop there that I used to go to in the basement. But I loved old things and
Mhm.
antiques, and still do, and interested in old stuff and old architecture. So the Garden City Hotel was really cool. So of course I tore it down, and they replaced it with a structure, I think, in the 70s. But I have not been by there. Um, I don't think since I left in like 70 or 73, something like that.
Oh
I don't
wow.
know if I've been there. And that we lived on a street called Cathedral Avenue, and there's this cathedral that's set in like a not a field, but it has like a big yard. Okay, a cathedral can have a yard, and it's like a downsized Gothic cathedral, so it actually looks kind of small. It's not like Reims or Chartres or something. It's like this, sort of little church, but it's a cathedral. I don't know what the hell makes a cathedral, but it's Episcopalian. It's not Catholic.
Money makes a cathedral, I think.
Yeah. And, Episcopalianism, that was the religion of the ruling class in those days. Now it appears to be Catholicism, but, back then it was old school WASP.
So you mentioned, old school, you mentioned a love of old things. When you filled out the form for me for the show, you mentioned that town that starts with an H. I just blanked on it.
Hempstead.
Yeah, you said you got a love of like thrift stores and antiquing and stuff there. Wait, what do you like about going and hunting at a thrift store?
Well, back in the day in Hempstead, like I said, it was largely a Black community, and there were thrift shops there where like upscale folks would donate their clothes and they would be sold in the thrift shops. So I used to buy suits from like the 30s with the double breasted with the big shoulder pads, and like, you could buy them for like $2 or $3. So I had at least a half a dozen of those. And I've been a vintage clothes fan ever since. And also like buying used clothes or a thrift shop. This shirt I bought in a thrift shop. I guess it's kind of obvious, but whatever.
I like that strategy, though. I always tell my wife when she wants to go thrifting, I'm like, let's go up to like the thrift stores, like Plato's Closet up in Beverly Hills or something, because rich people are just throwing out the most expensive crap you can imagine, and you can pick it up for a steal, or for a song.
Yeah. What I like is how design reflects the zeitgeist of any particular time period. So there was tremendous optimism in the 50s and 60s after the war, and that was reflected in the design in mid-century modernism. Very optimistic about technology, solving our problems, going to the moon and space and all that kind of stuff. So that's interesting, that how design reflects that. Or if you look at the Weimar period in Germany, or earlier in Vienna, the Werkstatt, just how all that design artists influenced each other, what was going on in the art scene in the interwar period in Germany. I mean, those are things I'm like obsessed with.
Yeah, it's like that whole it's what creative synergy, right? Like, fashion influences media, influences literature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just kind of goes on down the line to create a whole, vibe for the time period.
Right. Absolutely.
Nice. Okay, let's see here. Get back to my questions here. Okay, let's see. Okay, great. We have a game. So this game is called Hometown Trivia. I'm going to ask you some questions about your hometowns, the tri-village area, I guess, and we'll see how you do. Okay, so let's see here. First up, what famous former entertainment journalist has an album called Garden City dedicated to his hometown?
Famous journalist. I don't know.
I'd say entertainment journalist. That's pretty. He's also a musician. That might give you a hint.
Oh, John Tesh.
John Tesh. That's correct. Okay. Good old John Tesh.
Why do I know that? No, I'm remembering now because I think I looked at Wikipedia about Garden City when we started talking about doing the show, and because I'm sort of curious about it. I mean, when I left, it was like I didn't look behind me. I was like out of there, and like I said, I have not been back. I mean, not to diss the place, but it was just not it wasn't my jam. And
it wasn't your scene.
I mean, I would like to go back. I remember like a dairy farm on the way to school, the potato farms out in the Hamptons. So
Mhm.
it's changed a lot. It'd be interesting to go out. But anyway, I'm interrupting the flow here.
Oh, no problem. That's kind. I get an answer, but then hopefully I get a little bit after that too. So it's like a yes and situation. Um, okay. So what was the name of the millionaire who founded Garden City?
Oh, Stewart.
Stewart. Yeah, I'll give it to you. It's Alexander Turney Stewart. I in my research I was looking it up, and it said kind of sounded that he was like, I'm going to create this city to be for all the super powerful kind of rich people, which I thought was kind of interesting considering what you said about your hometown,
Right.
before we started today and since.
Yeah. The only reason I know that is, again, I think I'm slightly remembering that, but there was a Stewart Avenue. That was, I guess, the main drag
Mhm.
um, in town. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was okay. Next question.
Okay, what famous publishing company moved its operations to Garden City in 1910?
Doubleday and Company.
Doubleday. You were very correct. Very correct. Okay, let's see here. And we already kind of touched on this a little bit. How many golf courses are there in Garden City?
I don't know. I'm going to say either 8 or 18.
8 or 18? Wikipedia told me 3, but that
Really?
might be like a course with like a couple of different lawns or something on it.
Okay.
But that's what it could be wrong. Wikipedia's heinously wrong,
No,
famously wrong.
it's 18. That makes no sense. Three makes sense.
Yeah, and then you have the 18 holes. I'm not a golfer, but the
Right.
18 holes. All right, and last but not least, what professional wrestler also hails from Garden City?
Um, Donald Trump.
No, no. Well, I hope not.
Professional wrestler. I don't know.
It is. I'm not a huge wrestling fan myself, Paul. His name is Mick Foley. I know the name. I know it to hear it, but I wouldn't know it to see him in a ring necessarily.
Huh.
But no, you did good. You got you know what? You got all the points because what's it matter, right? So we're just
Uh,
gonna give you all the points, even though you got a couple wrong. Those were test ones. So good
right.
job. Okay, very nice. Well, we're gonna be back in just one moment. Let me get my screen here. We're going to be back in just one moment with more with Paul, but I'm going to play a little ad for you. So hang tight and we'll be right back. Where I'm From is brought to you by Stream Studio. That's STREANN Studio, the web app that puts you in charge of the live show. Stream Studio allows you to take your streaming game to the next level by allowing you to stream to multiple platforms at once. If you want to go to Twitch, if you want to go to YouTube, if you want to go to a website that isn't supported even, you can stream to all of those platforms at once, get feedback from your audience, and most importantly, it puts you in control of the show. Now, Stream Studio has several packages that work for just about any type of broadcaster. From the free plan, where you can stream with a watermark, all the way up to the gold plan, where you can have up to 8 guests. You can stream to as many social platforms as you want. You can get a web link to share your show with external audiences, and you can even get an iframe so you can embed your live stream show directly into your website. Hey, I love Stream Studio so much, I'm using it to produce this show. I want to thank Stream Studio for supporting Where I'm From, and you can give this fantastic software a spin and support Where I'm From at the same time. Just head over to our website at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom and click on the Stream Studio banner so they know we sent you their way. And we want to thank Stream Studio for sponsoring Where I'm From. Okay, we're back with Paul Zaloom, TV's Beakman. And so, Paul, this is always an interesting question to ask people. Does Garden City, and we'll expand it to, the Tri-Village area here, does your hometown have any sort of urban legends or anything like that, like ghost killers or pirates or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, Lindbergh left for his flight to Paris from the field out there, which at some point was called Roosevelt Field. I don't know if it was back then. And I always heard that we had the first mall in the country, but I don't know if that's true. And that was also called Roosevelt Field.
Yeah, I
But
actually, in my research, I found that I don't know if it was the first mall, but it was a very, very early one. I think it was built. It was built when you were 4 or 5 years old, I think.
yeah, yeah, it was built in the 50s.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it's cool.
yeah, no other urban legends or anything you can think of, local controversies, anything like that.
Um, no, I'm so disconnected. I was so disconnected from the place
Hmm.
um, that it's I was like a stranger from a stranger land or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Like I'm from a small town in West Virginia, and I kind of feel the same way about it. Like I have good memories there. I still have good friends there. You couldn't get me there for $1 million.
Uh,
But is there anything that you miss at all about the area?
no, I mean, the proximity to the city was great. You could get on the Long Island Railroad and be in
Hmm.
town pretty quickly because Garden City is close to the border with Queens. It's not
Hmm.
way deep in the island, and um, so going into town and going to the museum or whatever. And then I also remember as a kid going out to Montauk, uh, well, once, and it was really cool out there back in the day. And the Jones Beach, which is on the South Shore, not that far from our place, that those beaches are spectacular. I mean, I've never seen
Hmm.
beaches like that, where the sand will be a mile deep, and
Oh
like the
wow.
desert or something. And they were all tricked out during the WPA era with these cool Art Deco beach houses and toll booths and all this stuff. So, yeah, Jones Beach is really incredible.
I'm sure you probably went there with your family some, and I was doing some research on you, and I saw that you grew up in a big family just like me. I think we had like 8 kids and a few steps and halves and stuff. Uh, how did growing up in a big family, your environment sort of push you into comedy and performance, or did it?
Um, yeah, maybe I was number two son, number two child. Um, so maybe uh, that we're number two, we try harder thing. I don't know. And class clown, that was always my default. I
Yeah.
mean, you hear that a lot from comedians. I wasn't a good athlete, and I didn't do that great in school, but I could crack people up. So that was kind of the default thing, was
Yeah.
just being a buffoon.
Were there ever any big fights over like I don't know, splitting rooms or chores or anything with your brothers and sisters?
Well, there were two generations of us. There were three of
Hmm.
us who were born in the 50s and three that were born in the 60s, and we were separated by about 10 years.
Mm,
Um, uh, so it was really, we didn't really all six of us grow up at the same time because 10 years,
yeah.
that's a big distance.
Mhm. So it
But
wasn't
they
like
they all
a big brood.
uh-huh.
I said it wasn't like a big brood of you. It was kind of like, a couple would filter out as the others were coming up kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we were like that too, where it was like my parents had 3 kids and then they waited like 8 years and then they had 4 more kids. So they were like the older set and the younger set. And they definitely a bit of a generational divide in the house at points.
Huh.
But my
Yeah.
parents got free babysitting. So
Right, right. And I grew up in a house on Cathedral Avenue, which was kind of a fancy, you know, upscale, whatever, drag, a pretty heavily traveled street. But there
mhm.
were old houses. They were mainly built in the teens and the 1920s and some of them earlier. And the house it was an old Tudor house with like really pretty green ceramic tiles. I mean, it was a
Mhm.
beautiful house in that fake Tudor stucco with the beams, super corny crap. But inside, very, really nicely appointed. It had a black and white marble entryway. So black
Mm,
and white marble squares, and then this staircase to the side that sort of swept in a curve to the next level. And my
yeah.
mom put orange carpeting on that, which I thought, that was just the shiznit. The orange carpet was so cool, and the motif, because it was black and white tile. Everything in the entryway was all black and white, so the orange really popped, and there were leaded windows in the house, and it was pretty cool house.
Yeah, that's one thing about those, northeastern houses is they're just like, there's so much more style to them, where once you get like more southern and west in the country, it gets to be more like McMansions and, just like neighborhoods filled with identical houses where, in New York, Philadelphia, places like that, it's like you walk into a place, you're like, oh, I can feel the ghost in this room. Like, stuff happened here and, someone had an idea for this house.
Yeah, where I live in LA, actually, I live in Eagle Rock, and this is a development of 151 houses that were basically built in '63, and there were 4 basic models, and ours is the most indoor-outdoor, sort of mid-century. It has cathedral ceilings in the living room and lots of sliding doors and clustery windows upstairs, and the design is really, really great.
Yeah, if anyone listening has never been to Eagle Rock, it's a really nice area of Los Angeles. The first time I lived here about 15, 18 years ago, I had lived in an apartment on Weldon Avenue, and it was just such a nice neighborhood, so relatively safe compared to a lot of other areas of Los Angeles, plenty to do. And again, like you said, the architecture.
Yeah. It's not the super like hippest neighborhood like Echo Park or Los Feliz or Silver Lake. It's a little bit, it's a little north and east of all of that. And it's gotten more cachet now. People are more interested in it, but it was kind of perfect for us.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not as hip as all the other areas in Los Angeles, but I feel like it's way more accessible than some of the less hip areas of Los Angeles. Like, I feel like you can get to Hollywood, you can get to Pasadena, you can get to like North Hollywood all in about the same amount of time. It's just depending on what direction you're going.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But it's interesting living in this sort of Stepford Wives, planned neighborhood with the 4 different models of houses. I think if you came up here and you didn't know anything about it, you would be able to tell, well, they do look all very much in the same kind of style, even though the models are different. And and it also is, it's on a hill where there are no through roads. So there are no roads that go from X to Y that's the way to go. You can get from X to Y using these roads, but it's not the direct way. It's like, and so that means there's way less burglaries and any kind of street action, crimes, getting stuck up and all that. It doesn't really happen up here, even though it's relatively fancy upscale. These houses are between 22 and 2,600 square feet, which in my book is big, but not relative. It's all relative. It's not like Brentwood big, where it's 20,000 square foot house.
Yeah, but that's nice though that, because like you said, you're kind of closed off. You don't get the passers-by who could cause trouble for you.
Yeah, or even know that the neighborhood exists.
Yeah. Okay, I live I'm up just a little bit south of Pasadena, and there's a lot of times when I'm coming out of my complex, it's all gated with a key and everything, and there'll just be like shady characters hanging out there, like trying to get into your place or whatnot, and you can tell they're kind of like just moving through and seeing what opportunities they can find. But it must be nice to be the end point there, so you don't have to deal with random people. If someone's coming for you, they have a good reason, probably, at the very least.
Right.
Or you might know to anticipate them. Okay, so let's see here. Click back over here real quick. So you mentioned before that Roosevelt Roosevelt Field was one of the earliest shopping malls. It opened when you were a kid. Do you remember the local reaction to what would become an American staple?
Uh, I yeah, sort of vaguely. I mean, I guess
Hmm.
we were somewhat kind of excited about it. I mean, Garden City had outposts of the fancy department stores. Abraham and Strauss, Lord and Taylor. I think there was a Bergdorf Goodman there. Um, they're all bankrupt and out of the picture now, but
Yeah.
they were, and there was a Macy's too, which thank God hasn't gone out of bankruptcy. My mom worked at Macy's in the late
Mm.
'40s, so I would prefer it not go under. It's sort of a nostalgic thing.
Plus, they
Uh,
got the parade, right? So,
right, right. Yeah, I used to have a friend who his parents lived on Central Park West, and that's where
mhm.
the parade goes on the west side of the park on the avenue. I don't know what avenue. If it's Sixth Avenue, I don't know what the hell it is, but it's called Central Park West. So
Mhm.
they had a place upstairs with these really big windows, like two-story windows, and the floats would be at eye level. And I remember one time Superman was going by, and he turned and came like right towards the window. And my kid, Amanda, she was just a baby then, or a tyke or whatever. And I remember her fingernails digging into my neck in terror that Superman was like literally coming right towards our heads. The
Yeah.
Macy's Day Parade.
Luckily, it was before the modern trend of making Superman evil and giving him googly eye, weird, evil googly eyes and everything, because that would have been really intimidating.
Right.
Really intimidating. Okay, let's see here. All right, well, Paul, I've done my best so far to keep my fanboying to a minimum, but I'd love to hear the origin of Beakman's World and your involvement with it and how it all came to be, if you'd be so kind.
Um, the Well, the origin was the creator Jock Church had made uh, a column in the funny pages for kids, and he did it on a Mac in the early days of the Mac,
Mhm.
when nobody was really doing that, and he sent them out free. It was called You Can with Beakman and Jax, and it was the same sort of conceit as a show where kids would ask Beakman questions about science, and then Beakman and Jax, who were sort of equal characters in the comic strip, they would answer the questions. So he sent it out free to different papers, and it started catching on, and they started running it. And then he got picked up by Universal Press Syndicate. Universal, well, it's called Universal Below under the TV show. But anyway, it was a
Mhm.
syndicated column. They did Doonesbury. They sold syndicated cartoons and columns and that sort of thing. And they were also publishers, so they owned it. They hooked up with a TV outfit called Below, and had a partnership called Universal Below, and then they made a TV show out of the comic, out of this daily or weekly, I don't know, I guess it was weekly comic, because it was a Children's Television Act in 1990, which said in order to get your license renewed, you needed to have a certain amount of educational and or informational programming a day, a local
Mhm.
television station. So our show was sort of designed to meet that requirement.
Yeah, the shows that have like the EI in the corner when they start up, right? That
I
sort of
don't,
thing.
I don't recall. I don't think that
Okay.
was the case back then, but it very well could be now.
Mhm. So, when you got approached about that, had you ever thought about yourself as like a children's television educator, or were you like, I don't know, man, this might not be my scene?
Uh, I mean, it was a very different turn for me. I came up in an avant-garde, neo-German expressionist, anarchist theater company that was not at all commercial.
Hmm.
That was my background, so it was a huge cultural shift. And I had been doing my own solo puppet shows for I don't know, 15 years or something when I got hired,
Yeah.
and just making a living by touring the shows and getting commissions and grants here and there, and just kind of eking a living out of the deal. Um, so it was a big difference for me to go from the downtown New York, just the wild sort of artist generated homemade theater thing,
Mhm.
to the super hierarchical Hollywood structure, which is really built around money more than anything else. So that was
Yeah.
an adjustment. But
Yeah.
that's,
If I remember correctly, you guys were on CBS, weren't you?
we started out in syndication,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
we had two or three fewer stations than Jeopardy, and Jeopardy was the number one syndicated show in the country.
Mhm.
So we had incredible coverage, well over 90% of the country. And then CBS went to Columbia Pictures Television, who they were the producing entity that Universal Bila put the show through or whatever. Partners, I don't really get it. But anyway, they said, oh, CBS said, we want to buy this out of syndication and make it a network show. We
Mhm.
want to take it out of syndication. And that just doesn't happen. I mean, maybe it does now, but back in the day, that's not how things worked. You had
Yeah.
shows that were on the networks that then became syndicated. You didn't have shows that were syndicated that became network shows.
Mhm.
But they want to be able to offer their affiliates an inoculation against FCC problems with having their local licenses renewed. So
Yeah.
that's why they wanted it. And then the next week, Fox ended up buying like 8 of their stations. The coverage, I think, was like 78%. So it wasn't a great move for us in
Mhm.
terms of coverage, but I guess it's prestigious to be on CBS. I don't know.
Yeah,
Beats me.
I'm trying to remember if I saw you syndicated because I was living in Houston at the time. I can't remember if I saw you in syndicated or on CBS. But one reason I don't know if this is true or not, but it occurs to me. I'm pretty sure CBS had some problems with another live action children's entertainer within like a year or two of you moving over there. I wonder if maybe you kind of tried to fill the Pee Wee's Playhouse slot or something.
Oh, not to my knowledge. I don't know anything
Okay.
about that.
Drat, I was hoping for an exclusive, Paul. Darn it.
Right.
Um, what was it like being a sort of a national children's entertainer? Like, did you start getting recognized when you went out to the grocery store, or how did it kind of impact your personal life?
Um, well, I didn't get recognized because I wore this fright wig, with the hair sticking up, and it totally changed my appearance. So I didn't, no, I got recognized maybe 20, 25 times
Hmm.
since 92. Um,
Yeah.
if people knew I was in town, then maybe they would recognize me like in town for a gig. That happened once, I think, in Brazil and Sao Paulo. Um, and then, yeah, and in Vermont, I had some friends and friends of friends who knew I was on the show, and maybe they. But the great thing was, no, it wasn't. I didn't have like a trademark bow tie or any of that crap.
Yeah.
It just didn't look. I didn't look like the guy, so I was anonymous, and that was great. That's the
The whole
way, yeah, the whole fame thing and being recognized, all that, that's just a pain in the ass. I don't, who needs
it's
that?
the Clark Kent Superman effect. The wig was your glasses, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of connecting back to talking about Superman earlier, was there ever a Beakman float in the Macy's Day Parade?
No, but I was on a float in the Rose Bowl parade.
Nice.
That was, I was hired to be on a float, and I literally was dragged through the street on something made out of flowers and waved at like a million people. There's supposedly a million people on the route. I don't know, but it was
Yeah.
interesting. It was very interesting being up there and the whole gig, and uh,
I've
yeah,
heard it's kind of wearisome after a while though, because you're just like you're either doing the same three motions over again or just standing there like waving the whole time and throwing candy. I've heard, it can, by the end of the parade route, it can be a little rough. Like you're like, where am I? What's going on? Disassociative.
Yeah, I mean, I just found the whole thing so sort of wacky and goofy that
Hmm.
being in the Rose Bowl parade and being televised and then there's a million people on the route. The whole thing was just so goofy and so outside my experience in life that
Yeah.
I was enjoying the hell out of it. And plus, I was like, no, you got to wave, you got to, make eye contact, look alive, all the rest of it, because it was a few hours out of my life,
Hmm.
but I just wanted to play it to the hilt. Otherwise, what's the point? It was a
Yeah.
very goofy experience. It was fun.
Now, back when Beakman was being produced, you said you didn't get a lot of people rolling up to you. Now that all the kids who are watching you, like me, are all grown up, have you found that you get approached more about Beakman?
No,
No.
not really. I'll get comments and stuff on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But when Latin America is a different story because the show's very popular down there in a
Hmm.
way that's different than here. Um, it's a pop cultural phenomenon in Mexico and Brazil and other countries in Latin America that it's difficult to describe, but it's
Yeah.
people are fanatically into Beekman in a way. It's crazy. I mean, people just really, really love the character, and I'll play to audiences of 4,000, 6,000 in at IPN at Polytechnico in Mexico City. They told me the audience was 10,000 people, and
Wow.
I was playing outside, and they go crazy. So I do a very low tech, down and dirty live science demo show as Beekman in Mexico and Brazil when I'm invited, and it's a
Mhm.
lot of fun, and people just love the character, and so that's interesting and cool.
Was it a situation where Beekman's been had a sustained popularity there since it started airing here, or was it something where like it went there like 4 or 5 years after it started here and then kind of picked up the following?
Yeah, I actually have no idea. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know when they began showing it down there, because what happened was nobody associated with the show knew anything about this, and I got
Mhm.
invited to the 75th anniversary of the physics department at UNAM, which is the largest university in Latin America, and it was in the Mexico City branch, and this woman from the department hired me to do a show as part of the 75th anniversary. And at first, they wanted me in a 600 seat theater and then an 800 seat theater. And then they said, can we do the show outside? And then eventually, I ended up doing three shows they said about 6,000 people per show. So they
Wow.
had no idea. I had no idea. And I got there in the stage. It was this huge stage. These cheering, screaming people just wigging out. It's like the story of that guy Rodriguez in I think that's his name in South Africa. They made a film
Mhm.
about this guy. He made an album in the 70s, and it didn't really sell or anything, but some people in South Africa like caught on to it and got really into it, and they made a film about the guy. It was like that kind of phenomenon, and it was a huge shock to me. I came home, told all my friends, and I don't think they believe me. I mean, they still don't believe me. I need 20 security people getting in and out of the venues. And you could say, well, why do people react that way? And it's because there was something about the character that really struck a chord with them emotionally. He
Mhm.
was very close to the screen. He was making eye contact with the audience. And, he was a pretty friendly, approachable character. Um, and so people established a strong emotional connection to him in a
Yeah.
way that did not really occur in the same way in the States.
Hmm.
And it's something about the Latin sensibility. I mean, it's really interesting. I've tried to get to the bottom of why the people are so passionate about the show down there, and I'll ask people down there, and they say, "Well, because the show was funny, or you explain science so well, or our kids' TV in Mexico is shitty," and they had whatever reasons, but that doesn't explain. It doesn't explain like my car being surrounded by people pounding on the doors, like the Beatles or something. That's about emotion. That's 100% about emotion. It's about the emotional impact that character had on them. The way the
Hmm.
Beatles music has this emotional impact to teenagers, when I was a kid or preteens. I mean, we just loved it because it just spoke to us. So it's mysterious and wonderful. It's been a great gift because it's really fun going down there. I've only played in Mexico and Brazil. I haven't played in Uruguay or in Chile, in Colombia, in Argentina, in all these other countries that have big Beakman fan bases, but I just haven't been invited yet.
Yeah, but I think it's just like maybe because I always very much identified with Beakman when I was a kid, and I think it was just because he was almost like a living cartoon character, and if you strip off just a little bit of the complexity of being a human and play this broad character, a lot of time it's like Scott McCloud, who wrote Understanding Comics, says that people will identify more with a simple smiley face than a detailed photorealistic painting. And I think that's probably a lot of the appeal, at least for me anyway, of Beakman, was just that he was a living cartoon character that would come right up to the screen and talk to me. So
Right,
so I felt like I had a relationship with him.
right, right. Yeah, that does explain it because kids don't make a big differentiation between the person on the screen and the person in the room. It's
Hmm.
not like they're looking at some celebrity or whatever. They're looking at somebody like their uncle in the room. I
Yeah.
I mean that's what I think. I could be wrong about that, but I mean I used to pick letters out of the bin. We had a bin on the stage that went around and around in the part of the show, and a hand would go in and pull a letter out.
Hmm.
I would just go in and pull letters out, and if they had return addresses, I'd call information, get the kid's phone number, and call them up from the set just as a goof.
Wow.
And I remember calling one kid who lived in Chinatown on Mott Street or Mulberry Street in Manhattan, which was near where I lived. I lived near Canal Street in Tribeca. And I called
Hmm.
the kid and he said, "Hey, thanks for calling, but like I'm in the middle of something." I go, that's the end of the phone conversation.
Beakman
So
got big timed by a
yeah,
kid.
it was great. I loved that. I thought that was really cool.
See that kind of that pisses me off just a little bit because I never wrote into you because I was like, oh, there's no way they actually read the letters. Like this is just like so you can get a sticker or something. I'm never gonna write in. Here to find out, you could just walk around the set one day and pick up. You could have picked up Billy Meeks's letter.
Right.
Missed opportunity. Missed opportunity for me anyway. I'm
Yeah.
sure
I mean,
you wouldn't have cared either way.
they did respond to all the letters. I
Mhm.
think they responded with postcards, and supposedly we got 1,500 a week at our high point.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't know how much the letters really inspired what we did on the show because I think the writers had to say, okay, here are all the issues we need to cover or we want to cover. We could figure out a way to cover because the writers were all very interested in science,
Mhm.
and then find a letter that matched that. Because in the beginning, the letters were fake because we didn't have anybody writing in because the show wasn't on the air. But
Yeah.
after a short while, they were real kids writing in, and we read the real kids' letters on the air.
Mhm. All right. Okay, let's see here. Oh, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up the Beakman talk. I do have one more game for you before I let you out of here, Paul, and it's called Hometown Hot Takes. Now, these are simple this or that questions. I'm going to give you two things, and you have to pick between them and tell me why you picked what you did. Make sense?
Okay, sure.
Excellent. Okay, first up, Gardens, and I think I know the answer to this one. Garden City versus Hempstead.
Hampstead.
Hempstead, obviously, because all the artistic stuff there and everything. Okay, thrift stores versus garage sales.
Thrift stores.
Why thrift stores? You struggled there.
Yeah, I don't know. Garage sales, it's just they're harder to plan. I'm always passing when I'm like, oh, I'm in a hurry. I wish I could stop. And thrift shops are like, I'm going thrifting. We're going to the thrift shop. So
Yeah, it's like appointment shopping versus a garage sale, which is like, oh, hey, let's check it out.
yeah, exactly.
Nice. Okay, Pee Wee Herman versus Captain Kangaroo, two other kids entertainers.
Well, I would say Pee Wee. I mean, I really enjoyed his show. I thought it was great.
Mhm.
It was wonderful and hilarious, and all the double entendres and everything. It was fantastic. It looked great. And the guy who did the puppets and some of the design of that show was the scenic designer of our show, and he also did the animations, the computer animations. Wayne White.
I always felt like the two shows had a very similar vibe, a weird vibe, which I naturally latched onto. So that's interesting to hear that, yeah, there was some creative talent behind both of them,
Right.
shared between both of them. Okay, so the Unnaturals versus Bread and Puppet Theater.
I don't even remember the Unnaturals. I saw that in a bio, or maybe it was on my Wikipedia page or something.
Oh, really? Yeah, it was on your Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, I kind of remember that. I don't know if it was a pilot or what. I did a pilot with the Mouse Sounds guy. Oh, geez, his name is Fred. Oh, crap, I can't believe it. He was on the guys what the hell was it called, the radio show that was on public radio for many years with the fake radio show, Lake Wobegon, all of that.
Wait, don't tell me.
No.
No,
It's a Lake Wobegon thing. Anyway, he did the
I know what
sound
you're talking
effects, and he did them all with his mouth, and he was a great guy. And I'm totally blanking on his name. I just saw him in a movie about Andy Warhol. So somehow I think he ran with that set for a certain period of time. But he has a great record that comes in a book called Mouth Sounds, and I'm very embarrassed that I am blanking on his name. So I have to Google it.
That's one of the benefits of doing the live versus the produced. We can take time to Google things if we need to.
Yeah, it's Fred Newman. His name is Fred Newman.
Oh, Fred, he was on the new Mickey Mouse Club, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And really great guy and super, super talented. And and there was an open mic at some point. I was doing B-roll or whatever, that second unit stuff. I was a correspondent or something on this thing. And there was an open mic, and I happened to say, instead of, what a jerk that guy is, I was going on and on about, he's so talented, he's so cool, he's great. So it was one of those good open mic, because I really felt that way. He's a very, very talented guy, Fred Newman.
Yeah, he was the guy. I think he was on New Mickey Mouse Club, right? And then he also did for the cartoon Doug. He did the bop that whole theme song, too.
Right.
Very talented dude. Very talented.
Yeah, and the Mouth Sounds book was super helpful to learn some of that stuff. And yeah, he's a cool guy.
Okay, and this I found a random interview you did online, like back in 2003 or something like that, and so I figured I'd throw this your way. Jeff Beck versus Beck, just Beck, Loser Baby.
I love Beck, but definitely Jeff Beck.
Definitely Jeff Beck.
That was my go-to jam when I was a kid. Truth and Beckola, those first two albums with Rod Stewart and Ron Wood, and Mickey Waller, Nicky Hopkins. Records are amazing. Amazing.
Okay, puppetry versus, physical acting.
Oh, puppetry for sure. It's way
Puppetry.
more interesting to me.
What is it that you like about it versus, standing there and playing a character as yourself?
I just like projecting something through an object and manipulating, bringing things to life, and getting to play a lot of different characters and playing with scale, and everything being homemade, and it just really appeals to me. That's how I do myself and how I introduce myself is as a puppeteer. I don't really feel like much of an actor, because what I was doing on Beakman wasn't really acting; it was more like performing.
Yeah.
It's just sort of two-dimensional, fake, whatever comedy. It's not like acting or methody. Like, what's my motivation? It's just not like that. Just playing a character.
Does performing with a puppet, does it free you up a little bit, like from feeling like you're going to get judged by the audience you're performing for? Does it give you like a layer of separation?
Well, there is a layer of separation, not so much being judged by an audience, but traditionally not getting arrested by the authorities. I mean, that's been true for many, many hundreds of years, that puppeteers could say things in their performances that actors couldn't say, because an actor or a performer would get up and say these things. It's like that person is saying it, even if they're playing another character. But with the puppets, the authorities just by nature, kind of stupid, and the fact that it's mitigated through a a third party, so to speak, makes it not as offensive.
Understood. So it's not necessarily protecting your personal emotions about performing. It's more protecting you from the ideas you're expressing, by putting a proxy in between to separate.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, people were criticizing the king or the government or whatever would use puppets to express these things, because you could be more subtle and it's more distanced, and they wouldn't get in as much trouble.
Cool. Okay, now this is a three-fer. Eliza versus Josie versus Phoebe. Your three assistants on Beakman's World. Which one would you pick in a pinch?
I'm not answering that. No way. I mean, they all brought different things to the table and different talents, and they were totally different characters. And I really enjoyed working with all three of them. And we had a lot of fun on the set. We just laughed our asses off all day and got along pretty great. So it was fun.
Yeah, I put a gotcha question in here. Unfortunately, you didn't go for it. Oh, I have one more gotcha question. Okay. Mr. Wizard versus Bill Nye.
Oh, boy.
You can always skip it if you want to. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to take a pass.
Fair enough. Okay, and last but not least, East Coast versus West Coast, where you are now.
Yeah, that's really hard. I love them both. I love California, and I love New York and Vermont, and I love Chicago. And there's a lot of great places. What can I tell you?
Fair enough. And so just for the last three, you get triple points, because when someone says, I can't choose, you get a bonus for that. So good job, Paul. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, Paul, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Now, just out of curiosity, I'm out here in Los Angeles. Do you do any performance out here, any live shows or anything that I could come check out?
I've been focusing on making short films in the garage since the pandemic. So I'm kind of focused on that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Where can people do, or any of those online? Can people check those out?
Yeah, I have a channel on YouTube called Fruit of Zaloom. It's one word, Fruit of Zaloom, all put together. And their Santa Claus is the main character in the movies. And there's, 6 or 7 of them up there on YouTube.
And it's just, I think I took a look at that while I was researching for the show. And it's just basically just like I think it's you kind of doing all the performance and stuff, right? Like you play live action characters and you do puppetry and everything.
Yeah, I'm using like 300 Santa Claus kitsch figures and using Santa Claus as sort of a stand-in for, I don't know, the king of capitalism and consumerism, and they're little satires about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch or other stuff, medical errors and high cost of medical care, just where I can get my jollies doing political satire using Santa Claus. And the thing is about Santa, if you can do a long shot of one of the figures, the kitsch figures, and then do a close up, use another one, and then do a 2-shot with another one, and everybody knows who it is because it's Santa Claus. So I have all these different tchotchkes playing Santa Claus according to their expression and what I need for the scene. That's kind of the conceit of the thing.
Quite fun, quite fun. And everyone definitely go and check it out. Okay, Paul, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. For everyone out there watching, if you like the show, please consider going to Apple Podcast or wherever you get a podcast and leaving us an honest review to help get the word out about Where I'm From. You'll find links to all the places you can find the show at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom. It's all one word. You can also watch us record the show live. You might be doing that now at twitch.tv/billmeeks. And I'm also going to be doing a live call-in show in the near future where you can call in and tell me about where you're from. If you want to be involved in that, go ahead and shoot me an email at bill@billmeeks.com. All right. Well, that does it for this week. Join us next time when I talk to somebody else about where they're from. See you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. And yeah, I just hit off live and everything. Really great getting to talk to you and everything, for sure.
What is that thing behind your head?
Which thing?
The other direction.
This one?
No, this other thing. Yeah, what is that?
Oh, that's a zonk from Let's Make a Deal. I went on Let's Make a Deal when we moved here last summer. And it was like I was a lumberjack and it was a prop axe and then the zonk thing, and that was on my head. So I just went ahead and tossed it up there. Trying to throw a little.
Were you a contestant?
Yeah, I was a contestant. I won I won a foosball table and a dart machine that still isn't here yet, even though I did it close to a year ago. But it takes them a while to get those prizes out, you know.
Wow, he's a.
Yeah, but all right, very cool. Well, I'll go ahead and let you get going. Thanks so much for being generous with your time and everything. I'll go ahead and shoot you an email when the final episode goes out. But beyond that, thank you for fulfilling dreams today, Paul. Very appreciated.
Oh, you bet. It was my pleasure.
Excellent. All right, well, have a good day.
All right, you too, man. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.